Hello, and welcome to the Kathleen Spracklin Podcast. I'm a woman on a mission to help you get the Zettelkasten of your dreams on your work table beside you. Well, today I'm answering a minimalist question from a gentleman named Dan. Dan sent me a detailed email today with some questions on his Zettelkasten. Very well described. Thank you, Dan. And he's, among other things, he's basically asking two questions that he feels are independent, but I think they're very closely linked. So I'm going to answer them both together. But I'm going to answer it as though it were just one question. And incidentally, I'll show the answer to the other. So here's the question that I'm going to answer directly. Dan mentions that he has a lot of very eclectic interests, and he's very interested in facts because he feels that he needs facts to hang other ideas from those facts. And so he wants to keep facts as main cards. And he simply mentions that as his regular practice. And then he asks a question, do you really use a directory card every time you have two or more child cards from a given main card? Doesn't that end up with just a massive number of directory cards in your Zettelkasten? And I'm going to show you why those 2 points are actually very closely related. And the answer to one turns out to be the answer to the other, even though you might not think it at first. So I've got an example set up at my down-facing camera, because it is my belief that sometimes it's much more informative to see an actual example laid out in front of you in cards using 2 different approaches and see what the difference between the 2 approaches is. And the 2 approaches that I'm talking about have to do with 2 different mechanisms for dealing with factual information that's very dear to your heart, that you want to keep close by your ideas. So I constructed an example that I hope will illustrate my point. I drew from this book that you've seen before if you've watched my podcast. It's by Carmen Simone, PhD, Made You Look. It's really well researched, and I enjoy it very much. It's practically a coffee table book, and so entertaining, besides being full of wonderful information. So I recommend this book just for the entertainment value, even if you aren't interested in psychology or marketing, which it's really dealing with the place where psychology comes into marketing, and very science-based, very factual-based. So it gives me an excellent example to use for constructing the cards that will illustrate my point. So head on over to the down-facing camera with me, and I'll show you the cards I made from this book. Okay, so here's an example card that will let me illustrate for you how I would handle supporting facts that relate to a given idea that I want to keep in my Zettelkasten. I have a pretty firm rule that my main cards need to carry ideas, not facts. And if I want to keep facts, I either leave them on the bib card, or if they're very important to me and very dear to my heart, I'll put a star, which indicates that there's something on the back of the card, and then I'll flip the card over and treat it like a bib card in its own right and put the facts on the back. This is my normal way of doing it. So let's review what's here. Dr. Simone is making the point that probabilities are not really a good way to convey proof of your factual point. And she's very much in the idea of how do you demonstrate the truth of your claims when you're making a marketing claim. And she's kind of making the case that probabilities are really not a good thing to try to use to convey truth to your reader. And so that came across as how helpful is it to define truth in terms of probability, such as including words like a statement that is most probable? Well, the answer to that is not very. And then my reaction was, yet we feel that the probabilities mean more than they do. And so I summed it up in a tagline, probability is a poor standard for truth. On the back side, I gathered 3 of the points that she made in support. It said she's pointing out that if we say there's a 90% chance of sunshine, but it rains, does that mean that that statement was false, that there was a 90% chance of sunshine? Well, no, it doesn't mean it's false at all. Okay, well, how about this one? What if you're going to go for 99% probability? You ride the train to and from work, so that's 500 trips a year, and the train is on time 99% of the time. You're safe, right? Well, that still means you'll be late to work or get home late 5 times a year. And wouldn't you know, Murphy's Law will guarantee that one of those times that you arrive late at work, it will be to miss a very important meeting. That's just Murphy's Law, and we all know that's true. And the third point that she makes is that human beings don't really have a good intuition for probabilities to begin with. We confuse them with expectations, and we aren't very good at judging those expectations. And then I threw in one just thinking about scientific research where they talk about confidence intervals at the 0.05 or 0.01 confidence interval. Well, that means they're expecting 99.95 or 99.99% before they're going to be talking about belief. So there's all the facts. And to me, this is a great place to have them because they're right next to the point that was being made that I summarized as probability is a poor standard for truth. So they're close by, and yet everything that I need is on one card. And notice this is one card that itself does not have a directory card because this is the end of the line for that statement. Now let's say, what if I said to myself, but I am a lover of facts, and I want to gather these facts, and they deserve main cards. So let's do that. Let's take that as an alternative. A/B test. So now, instead of just being a little point on the back of my main card, this needs to be a full main card in its own right. If we say there's a 90% chance of sunshine, but it rains, was the statement false? And then we have to react to it. Simone suggests that having a contingency plan in place for your customers if you're at that 90% level sounds like a good idea to me as well. And then we have to summarize that into a tagline. A 90% chance is no guarantee. Now, before I go further and show these other two cards, if you were attending a party and there was an interesting conversation going on amongst marketeers and statisticians, and they were debating the question, is probability a good standard for truth? How welcome would your remark be if you walked up to that conversation and said, a 90% chance is no guarantee? Well, you'd stop the conversation cold. Yeah, and what's your point? Oh, no, that's just a fact. Okay, and your point? See, we don't do that in conversations. We share points back and forth, not reciting facts. All right, so holding that in mind, now let's go to the next one. So we've got a whole main card made here. And now I have to take the next one and turn that into a main card as well. And now here, that point that I made about scientific truth fits in nicely with this 99%. So I could add that as my reaction. That's fine. But I was able to put my reaction here as well. And now the tagline is, even 99% probability fails 1 in 100. Again, can you imagine walking up to that conversation and saying, even 99% probability fails 1 in 100? You would not be a very welcome guest. Now let's take the third one. Well, the third one is a little bit out of the realm of a fact because it's actually making a claim. It says that we don't have good intuition for probabilities, and we're using what we expect to happen as a substitute. So I did put this down as though it were a fact, but this is actually an idea. People don't have good intuition for probabilities. We conflate them with expectations. Now, so you wouldn't really be out of line at a party making that claim because it is actually a point. So this one might actually deserve a main card of its own, but if it does, it deserves a star and some reasons which Dr. Simone did not supply. The example that she did supply, I would quibble with. She's talking about why expectations do not really work as estimates of probability. As a mathematician, that's how you define probability, is what you would expect. The number of successful tries you would expect over the space of total tries. So expectation and probability are synonymous. And really what the statement you have to make is that people's expectations don't square up with probability very well. And in that case, you are going to want some facts to make that out, and there aren't any facts to go with that one, so I left it in that form. Now look at what you've got. Instead of having one card with one interesting point, one interesting reaction, and some supporting facts and reasoning, you've now got 4 cards. These cards need card numbers. Well, no problem. 1M2C-2 ABC, right? No, not right. That violates the mechanism of placing a card in the Zettelkasten. That's not allowed. Each card gets to choose its place in the Zettelkasten. And that means you take out the index and you look at people and expectations and matching and probability, and you let this card go wherever it wants to go. It gets to choose its parent. Now you might say, well, wherever it goes, this is going to at least be an alternate parent. And I accept that. And rather than drag out that point, let's pretend that these 3 cards, all 3 of them chose this card as its parent. Then we'll give them numbers accordingly. Okay, so now we've got 3 cards, 3 child cards of this card. Guess what? We need a directory card now, don't we? Yep, sure enough, we need a directory card because we've got 3 choices for this one card. And now here's our conversation. Let's look at our exciting conversation. Probability is a poor standard for truth. A 90% chance there's no guarantee. Even 99% probability fails 1 in 100. People's expectations don't match the probability. Now, the only thing that's really interesting are these 2 lines because they're both ideas. These 2 are just dead stops of dull factual information. And this one that's an interesting conversation has no factual information to go with it. I don't doubt it, but it's just up for conjecture. And now look at why I said this is also the answer to Dan's question of, well, because this card now has more than one child card, that means it's going to have a directory card. And doesn't that mean you're just going to have a whole lot of directory cards in your system? It's just going to clog all up with directory cards? And the answer is maybe. If you feel that you have to keep every fact on a separate main card, then yes. But if you're willing to have your main cards carry ideas and let the facts tag along either by leaving them on the bib card or putting them on the back of the main card, voila, no need for an added directory card. And I should make one other point. Let's do a little drawing. Now, this is a tree structure diagram, and pretend these are cards. If this top card has 2 choices, and each of those has 2 choices, and each of those has 2 choices, then how many directory cards are you going to have versus how many main cards? Well, first of all, if you add them up, you've got 15 cards. And if you count these up, 7 of them have directory cards and 8 of them do not require directory cards. And this is going to be true no matter how you structure your tree. You will never be in a situation where you have even quite half of your main cards having directory cards. It's just the nature of a tree. If we go with a branching factor of 3, where every card has 3 children, then you've got a total of 40 cards, 13 of them directory cards, and 27 of them have no directory card. So no, you're not going to clog up the system with directory cards. Even if you make a whole bunch of fact cards, really you have 4 cards here and you only have 1 directory card. That's not a bad proportion. I think it's not worth it because I don't think these are worthy of being part of a conversation. But that's just my opinion. So I only go on about this so that you can understand why I'm of the opinion that I don't put facts on main cards. But I always have to emphasize that what you are building is the Zettelkasten of your dreams, not the Zettelkasten of my dreams, your dreams. So that means if your dream Zettelkasten has facts on main cards, put your facts on main cards, but make them real main cards. Here I've got one tagline, and it's got to be indexed with every key word. Probability, proof, standard truth, 4 keywords that are going to get introduced using this full tagline. If I put the 3 supporting facts on main cards, guess what? Now each of these taglines has to be indexed by each of the keywords in each of those taglines. You have also quadrupled your indexing. And did you gain that much more in your indexing? I doubt it. But again, that's just my opinion. And play with it. Try it out, see what you think. My suggestion would be go ahead and try putting those facts on the back of a main card and see if you aren't just as comfortable with them there as on separate main cards. But if you do want to put them on separate main cards, then that means you want to treat them as ideas. So express them as vividly as you can, such that you could walk up to a conversation in progress on probabilities in this case, and make a statement that wouldn't dead stop the conversation. So let's play with this. A 90% chance is no guarantee. That's going to stop your conversation cold. But if you make a slightly different statement, that is 90% chance, I think a lot of people would say that was a pretty darn good chance. But when you think about it, that's 10%, 1 in 10 of failure. I wonder if people realize when they think about it and contemplate probabilities, if they really realize that 90% isn't that perfect a guarantee. See, now you've brought something into the conversation besides just the fact. So try to make your tagline as dynamic as possible, with an action verb if you can, and with something that belongs in a conversation. And then fine, keep your fact on a main card. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.